Hey Gerard, welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So, how have you been keeping yourself busy with all the cricket that's been going on, but also with the pandemic?
I found myself unemployed at the start of the pandemic. So I had a very busy year of cricket coming up. And then suddenly I lost about 8 or 9 months of work overnight. So I spent the last 6 or 7 months trying to build that back up and started my own YouTube channel and my own podcasts and my own emailer, so that if we ever get in a position like this again, I won't have to worry too much.
Wait, but I was having this conversation with this cricket journalist in India. His name is Amit Sinha, and I think you've had a conversation with him as well on his podcast. I think his podcast is called Random Cricket Photos
Oh
that
yeah.
make me happy. Yeah. So he was saying you were one of the first cricket journalists to actually have a podcast, though. Like you started something like this much earlier than it became fashionable, let's say.
I think I started my first podcast in 2008. There wouldn't have been many cricket podcasts around at that time. I know for a long time I was sort of number one in all the pops, and that was kind of talking to myself. That stage we didn't really know what podcasts were. I just moved to London. I didn't have a lot of contacts, and it was before you could easily record over Skype and those sorts of things. So I just started talking on my own, and then I think for a little while I did one with Gideon Haigh. It's not very well known that me and Gideon Haigh had our own podcast, but again, we were sort of, it's the only time Gideon Haig's ever been ahead of the curve when it comes to that sort of stuff. It's kind of old-fashioned, man. He's going to hate this if he listens to this, by the way. And then Sportsman eventually had one. So I on and off I had them. The problem was, I was working for ESPN, and ESPN is such a reactionary company in many ways. So I would say to them, look, this is coming, this podcast thing. I've been a big podcast fan for a long time. By that stage, I was probably listening to podcasts back in 2004, 2005. So a long, long time I've been listening to podcasts. I always knew this was coming because it's such a brilliant medium. And I would go to Cricinfo and ESPN and say, we should do this. And occasionally they'd be like, yeah, because ESPN suddenly realized there was a wave coming. But I can't remember what it was, but maybe 2012, 2013, the slate of podcasts. And it was just like, we can run the table on cricket podcasts here. And they were like, oh, we're not doing podcasts. Podcasts aren't big anymore. And of course, 3 years later, it was the year of the podcast. And I got a call from ESPN going, so that idea you had, I'm like, okay. So it's been quite interesting. Working for a company like ESPN, a lot of the things that I did a very long time ago, I was sort of ahead of the curve. But once you end up in a big company, they sort of, I wouldn't say it slows down, but it changes. It changes what it is. And you can't always do it. I used to say to Cricinfo towards the end of my time there, you guys hired me for video and I haven't been in front of a camera in a year and a half. Like, sometimes those things kind of happen when you're in a big company like that. So me and Zaltzman, we had a podcast with ESPN, then they weren't doing podcasts. So Zaltzman and I did it independently for a while, then that disappeared. And next thing you know, there's a pandemic on, and I had all these ideas, which I had actually pitched to Cricinfo and some other places of shows. As I said, I'm a massive fan of podcasts, and I'd never made a podcast that was exactly what I wanted it to be. And I knew that I always had this idea that it was silly that we had all this great cricket writing content out there and we didn't have anyone literally taking those things and making them into interviews and discussions about the same topic. Same again with, I wrote this book about the history of Test cricket. I was quite happy it came out. Me and the publisher maybe didn't have the greatest relationship. They didn't publish it all around the world. So people in Australia bought it, but people around the world found it harder to find. And I'm like, there's no reason why that book can't be turned into a podcast. And so ideas like that. So I was kind of there at the beginning when it came to podcasts, and sadly probably didn't keep it going as long as I should have. But it's fun to be back.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting to hear because at least from what I hear from independent journalists and others alike, even that what the podcasting medium gives you is this freedom to express ideas that probably may be a little more difficult to, let's say, pass through in a conventional medium. You can talk about the same media houses as you were talking about, be it in a cricketing context or in a wider societal context as well. So how much freedom has this medium given you? And like talking about ideas that let's say, conventional media would be hesitant to do in that sense.
There's something about podcasts and video and
Yeah.
those sorts of things that is more, I don't want to say forgiving, but people understand that it's a conversation in a way that written articles aren't.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we did a big conversation on why there aren't more black African batsmen in South Africa, and it's quite a wide-ranging conversation. It needs two people to talk to each other to bring it out at a certain level, because when you're writing it, it can feel very prescriptive, and you're also worried about your word choice at all times. In a conversation, there's a little bit more people understand that. And, I find that I also do a lot of radio work, and I work for talkSPORT. Now, talkSPORT is the world's biggest sports radio station. So you would think if you say something stupid there, it would be kept with you forever. But realistically now, Twitter and an article is something that is far more concrete. Whereas talkSPORT, you sort of say something and afterwards you go, I knew what I was trying to get to there and I almost got it, but I didn't quite get it right. If you do that in an article, someone will screenshot it and send it to you for the rest of your life in a way that doesn't happen in these other mediums. And then what podcasts allow you to do is, if you look at the podcast, it's quite Red Inker, which is the main conversational podcast I have, is really successful already. And yet the first episode was about match fixing in UAE cricket, right? The second or third episode was about the pace at which women cricketers bowl. Now, where else am I going to get the freedom to be able to discuss those? I might be able to write a piece, but I won't get the freedom to be able to have a 25-minute chat on a radio show or on anywhere else. A podcast allows that. And the thing is that there's actually a lot of really interesting science behind, how why women cricketers bowl at the pace they do, the historical context of that people who aren't interested in that can get it and will listen to the conversation. And the same with the UAE. If you say you're going to do something on UAE cricket, I'm sure most people sort of roll their eyes a little bit. But when you tell the story of this team turned up to a World Cup, and during that World Cup, or before the World Cup and during that World Cup, they lost a third of their squad. That's never happened before. That's never happened to Pakistan. If it hasn't happened to Pakistan, it's never happened to a major team, right? And so you're suddenly in this point where you have the ability to flesh that out. And I'm not sure that someone would click onto that link. But once you subscribe to a podcast and once you get into it, I think there's a certain point where people are like, they will listen to it because it's a conversation. So it allows for a lot of different things. And also, working for ESPN was always big on don't be self-referential. So you don't want to talk too much about the writing process in the writing. And look, I get that. And it's a mistake that a lot of young writers make. But there are some times when it's really important. And what that particular podcast is, the podcast is called Red Inker, specifically because it's a play on word on writing as much as it is on cricket. And the idea is when Bharat Sundarasan comes up, finds Patrick Patterson, the story of how he finds Patrick Patterson and why he was interested in Patrick Patterson is as interesting as what happens when he finds Patrick Patterson. And I know that because of different projects that I've worked on. Sometimes the story is as or more interesting. I've recently done a project on the true story behind the film Cool Runnings, right? One of the most interesting things there has been my conversations with the CIA, because the CIA is involved with that story. It's a hard thing. If I'm writing a piece, that's a hard thing to really flesh out, right? But in conversation, to say that, I sent an email to the CIA and they called me, you can start to talk about that in a way that you can't. So I find it I'm trying to think of the word. It's just a different way of telling stories. And if you look at my career, I started as a blogger. I went to podcasts. I briefly I did videos. I've written short form, I've written long form, I've written analysis pieces like data. I did infographics for a long time. Now I'm onto video essays. For me, it's all the stories are kind of the same. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to find the right way to talk about them in each way. So I kind of thought that if the way my career is currently going, if I come up with a really good story idea, there is no reason why it can't be an episode on Red Inker. There is no reason why it can't be a written piece for someone. There's no reason why I can't turn it into a video essay. All of those things are individual of each other and they all have their own arc. And the other thing that you find is that we started putting the Red Inker episodes up on the YouTube channel. And originally when we did it, we felt like we were cheating a little bit because it's like, we're just putting a podcast on a YouTube channel. But then you find that there are all these people that don't go to podcasts. So for them, that's still a new way. There are podcast people and there are YouTube people. There's a very small crossover between the two because they're very different mediums. And before I got involved in YouTube, I mean, I was posting to YouTube, well, probably when it started, quite early on, but I was certainly posting stuff to YouTube in around 2004, 2005. I started posting cricket stuff to YouTube in 2007, 2008. But since then, but then I moved on to ESPN, so I sort of left YouTube. You don't realize that there's this whole community of people on YouTube that just follow cricket kind of via YouTube people. All those different markets sort of play off each other differently. And then you got your emailer, which is, for me, which is people who are more fans of me personally. They're not as maybe sometimes they're interested in the stories, but they're sort of interested in my take on the stories or those sorts of things. You realize that you can I can pitch a piece to Cricinfo now. In a month's time, I can do a podcast on it. In 3 months' time, I can do a YouTube video essay on it. And in the middle, I can probably write an email about why it's happened. And none of those things are not creative entities in their own. It's not like I'm just copying and pasting. Like they all have their own life and they all go to a different audience. And you do realize that there are very few people who are what I would say fans of your work. You get a few of those. But what you do get is you get people who you are part of their sort of their podcast rotation. You are part of their, YouTube feeling. You're one of the emailers they're subscribed to. They follow you on Twitter. And if you put up a link to something that they find interesting, they'll click on it. And you start to work those sorts of things out. So then what you're doing is you're taking the one great idea and you're looking at all the different ways that you can stretch it and make it better. Because realistically, there is no perfect medium. There are just all these different mediums available to you.
So you touched upon a lot there, and just to unpick maybe one of them is that so as you were talking via email, so you asked me if it's going to be a video chat or just an audio thing. So have you considered putting up, let's say, so what's often happening nowadays is that the podcast, even if it's in an audio form, people just have a camera on there so that people can, because some people just like that intuitive way if they're actually watching faces and how they're actually building thoughts in that sense. Have you given that much of a thought, like just putting a camera on there when you're having a conversation with someone?
Oh, I have. I've certainly got interviews where that might end up happening. There's one that's coming up soon on Red Inca that we might just put up the video only because the person I talked to was quite emotive. One reason I didn't do that is there is a freedom with it's fine for someone like me who's spent most of my life in front of a camera.
Yeah.
I was a filmmaker before I became, a video guy for Cricinfo, and I'm used to all this. Sid MONGA, if he knows that you're putting a camera on him, he's going to be different. Now, I want the Sid MONGA that I'm used to having a beer with, right? I don't want the Sid MONGA who knows that the camera is on him. In fact, MONGA sent me a message. He's going to be really upset I said this. But MONGA is still upset that we used a photo from the still.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, MONGA, but you knew the minute you sent me that message, I was going to make fun of you. Now, someone like Barrett might go either way. But there's a certain freedom to knowing that we're just, without me worrying about picking. But without me worrying, and I haven't spun my chair the wrong. All those little tiny things, and you get a good percentage of people are fine with that, but others aren't. And I also, if you look at my YouTube page, it's very specific. What I made my career standing in front of a camera outside of cricket grounds, making fun of cricket, right? When I came up with that, so that YouTube channel comes from a guy called Arya Yuyutsu, who is a friend of mine. We work together at Cricinfo. He's one of the most creative, engaging people that you ever meet. A complete doofus, a hipster doofus, but very talented and very smart guy. He was desperate for me to do this because he's Akash Chopra's nephew. He got Akash onto YouTube, so and him and Akash have done a lot of projects even before the YouTube together. And he's saying, Akash is doing this. There's no reason why you can't do this. I think he got Ian O'Brien on early on. Then he got Brad Hogg, and a few. He's now with football clubs and a few other people. I'm trying to remember who's in his stable. He's got so many people currently. But I said to him, look, in 2008, 11, I was standing in front of a camera talking. I don't need, if you can find a way for me to be able to do something creative that isn't me standing in front of a camera talking, I'll be very, very interested in doing it. Originally, it was going to be just taking the Double Century podcast, which is my history of cricket podcast, which is a narrated podcast. And I said to him, I will write that. If you want me to write up a brief script of how to visualize that, I will send that on to you and you can do that. And he was like, yep, that's perfect. We will make a channel around this. And then when we were coming up with ideas, he sent me something, which I think is called Whiteboard Football.
Okay.
And it was very simple, a very simple animation where occasionally things are drawn up on the screen to illustrate a point that this football analyst was talking about. And I was like, is this something that we can make? And Ari's like, yeah. And I said, this is what the channel is then. It's explaining concepts in cricket that people don't understand through a visual medium. Then I'm adding to it. Me standing in front of a camera and telling you my opinion, that's not adding anything to the video. And I'm a filmmaker. So for me, I want to be doing something extra. So if you go back to the video projects I did, so Two Pricks at the Ashes was the original one, which turned into the Two Chucks on ESPN. Then I did 2 Men Out with Andy Zaltzman. If you look at it, there is a bit of man standing in front of camera, but there's actually incredible skits and information and animation sometimes that me and Andy did. And with me and Sam, I would edit together. I mean, there's a classic Two Pricks of the Ashes episode where there's a 1.5 minutes of Mitchell Johnson playing with a microphone, which is just, it's some of the best work I've ever done. I remember showing it to a Guardian masterclass and just them in stitches and just going, this is what you can do with a guy playing with a microphone. Open your minds. So that's what I wanted. So once we got this idea of how to make visual stuff happen, I wanted it to be that. So then to go back and put the podcasts on and have them as just guy talks to girl, girl talks to guy type thing. I just felt like it was a bit of a letdown on what we could create.
Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying. There are certain people, as I said, that I might start to do it with, especially the people who are maybe more comfortable, like the HARSHA one, for instance. HARSHA's not going to be any different with the camera on, with the camera off, I don't think. Some of the former players as well, they're very similar. Some of the people who work more in broadcast media. But there's also, it hasn't really hurt the podcasts. Like when we put it on YouTube, the good episodes are still sort of kicking off. Look, it's a very interesting thing. I want our YouTube channel to be, as much as possible, to be something that catches your eye. And I'm not sure that, me talking and you nodding is particularly that. But that doesn't mean that that can't be your channel or it can't be someone else's channel. It's just that you got to remember I'm an old man and I did this stuff 10 years ago. So for me, and I get really bored. So it's like, what can I do now? How can I push this to the next level? And can I make a podcast with no visuals work on YouTube? All those sorts of things I find very interesting.
That's really fun. But because the thing that really inspired me to start a sort of a podcast about was, I'm a really big Joe Rogan fan. And that's what saw the inspiration. So he started off with video conferencing. So obviously I'd try like the initial mail I sent to you as well. If you could do this in person, that's what I feel is just better in terms of a conversation as well, because there's some things I can just pick up when I am sitting right next to you in that sense. But yeah, I totally understand the points you're making. But sorry for this overly romanticized question, but there's probably a few of them there. That what does cricket really mean to you? Like, where did it start off for you, and how did the love for cricket start off?
I was born into a cricket family. The story is that I was at my first cricket game a week and a half or 2.5 weeks old. My father was playing and I think he missed 1 week of cricket and then came back and played the following week. In fact, it might have been a bye. He probably didn't miss a week, to be fair. So I was taken as a baby. My family was hugely involved with the local cricket club, presidents and on the committee. And my dad, my uncle was president. My father was vice president. My mum was the secretary and my auntie was the treasurer, maybe the other way around. So at one stage, my family ran the cricket club for a long period of time as well. It was just always, people say, when did you learn to love cricket? It's just, it was never not in my life. It was never not a thing. When I stopped playing for the first time, which would have been around 2001, I think, I think that took a lot out of my life and maybe changed who I was a little bit. I had a job where it just wasn't possible. I'd be working 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., sleep for 2 hours, and then go and play a game. And I wasn't enjoying any of it playing. And then I'd finish the game at 6 p.m. that night, have a shower, and go back to work. So, I did that for a little while and eventually had to give up cricket. So there are times when it maybe hasn't been as strong in my life, but it's just a part of me. My wife is a cricket fan as well. It's my son, my younger son is God, how old is he? 6. I say 6. He's a very inquisitive guy, and he always says, "Why cricket?" And I don't have a proper answer for it. It just was always there. I think it is a brilliant sport. I think, intellectually, I can give you many, many different reasons why I think it's one of the greatest sports that has ever existed. Well, I would say it's probably arguably the greatest sport that's ever existed. But on an emotional level, it was just always there, and it's given me a lot more than I've given it. I had a troubled time in my teen years. As I said, my early 20s as well. There are many times when the thought of, I was very close to suicide over a couple of different periods in my life. And cricket is certainly something where I remember quite clearly in my teens, especially, just being like, there's nothing else I have other than cricket. But if I kill myself, I don't have cricket. So, little things like that. And I just feel that the game of cricket has given me more than I could ever give it. So it's my job to fight as hard as I can for the sport itself.
Right. So you touched upon how it's one of the best sports that are out there. And why do you feel like why do you feel that is? Like, is it about the grit? Is it about, like, in a test match, if you're watching and just a bowler's bowling a 5-6 hour spell and the batsman just has to get through it, and that's just what we enjoy. But what is it about cricket that, let's say, makes you feel it's the best sport in the world?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's kind of an endless question. One is that whole nations have been developed through their cricket. So you can chart the rise from all the way through from Australia through to Afghanistan.
Yep.
And probably Nepal will be the next one. You can actually chart the way that the country has changed and that the society has changed because of cricket in a way that very few other sports outside maybe football allow that. Like basketball is my second favorite sport, and basketball's brilliant. Okay. I don't think basketball really changes the face of many countries in the way that cricket has. Think about Viv Richards trying to get respect for black men by the way he batted. There's something that cricket has. Early cricket, you had these Irish Australian guys desperate to defeat England in a way that seems silly now, but to them that was their colonial masters. And you watch, you watch teams beat England and you realize what it means for them to do that in a way that other victories in other sports don't. Then you've got the very nature of it. It is a hideously designed sport. I mean, it is so weird in there's no way you would ever have designed a sport to be like it is in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't handle the elements well. The ball doesn't handle the elements. The pitch doesn't handle the elements. You have the fact that we are playing on a living, breathing surface that changes. You can't conquer cricket. You can conquer a basketball court. You can conquer even a tennis court. It's going to have a slow degrading. It might get a little bit faster at Wimbledon towards the end. We don't know if a crack's about to open up in the middle of our pitch. We don't know if the ball's about to start stopping in the pitch or get faster in the pitch. Yep. Little things like that, I think, are utterly fascinating. You can get hurt in it. There is a brutality in cricket, but there's also how can you have at the same time Alan Donald storming into Matthew Hayden, who pulls him off the front foot for 4. It's just masculine energy everywhere. And then, and then a couple of weeks later, you have Phil Tufnell bowling to Navjot Sidhu, or maybe Navjot's not, Mohammad Azharuddin, sort of two almost feminine men in a way. Phil Tufner with all of his frills, and Azharuddin with this sort of almost feline nature to him, and they're both in the same sport, the same way that Guyana and the WACA both exist. Boston Gardens is not that much different to any other basketball stadium. It's a little bit different, but it's not that much different. Guyana and the WACA are two different sports, and we play the same format on them. It's just stuff like that goes on and on and on. I mean, I love American football, but sometimes I'm just like, the fuck is the quarterback listening to some old guy in the thing? He's out on the field, let him read the plays, and that's what we do in cricket. The captain comes up with it, and you can't give a cricket captain a manual on how to captain. Like the NFL quarterback gets the playbook, right? You can't do that in cricket because there's too many options. You would be there forever. It's impossible to come up with one sort of set of plays for cricket. It's never ending, and it's inconquerable, and it's dramatic, and it's international, and it's violent, and it's pretty. It's got a lot of different things going that most sports don't have.
So you touched upon several things there, but one of them is that is this international aspect to it, and how these colonial states who were once under the British regime really find it great if they ever beating, let's say, in a test match or something like that. So do you feel like tribalism really plays a role in that? Like, that's why, like, I'm a big football fan myself as well, and I like this whole culture of supporting your club more than anything in the world. It's just that this aspect of tribalism. I'm not really into basketball that much, but maybe it's not as you mentioned on a greater scale in that level. And cricket, when you look at national teams.
Yeah, don't say that to Celtics fans. Look, I think sport is at the base of everything, a very tribal experience. So I talked to a psychologist recently for a project I was doing, and he was talking about the fact that sport has basically replaced war. And he talked about the fact that Manchester was a city absolutely taken over by knife crime. And one way that they stopped the knife crime was by boys' clubs, and those boys' clubs became Manchester City and Manchester United, right? And on a very basic level, that is what sport does. It replaces the tribal need that we have up until the 1700s, really, but maybe even the 1800s. Generals were the big stars, warriors were the big stars. That's not the case anymore. I don't know what percentage of people in their country would know who the general of their country is. That would be different for different societies. It might be different for a Pakistani than it would be for a Canadian. But in general, I think if you look at it compared to 150 years ago, when everyone would have known who the general was, you can see that these things have changed. So we then add nationalism to cricket, which is the best and the worst part of cricket. It's the worst part because nationalism is at its heart, absolute, wank. And realistically, you might have more in common with a, Chinese person you've never met than you will have with the bloke who lives around the corner to you. And nationalism is also, it's nonsense because as someone who spent a lot of time in India, people from Kolkata ain't nothing like people from Delhi, right? So, and as someone from Melbourne, we're not like people from Perth. We share some common things, but realistically, I feel much more at home in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, than I do in other parts of Melbourne. So what does that make me? So that means I just like my little area. So anyway, nationalism is nonsense, but it does allow for the passion to come through. And it does allow for the games to be, because let's be honest, at the very heart of what all sports is, in cricket's case, a bloke comes in and throws a ball down at a bloke holding a stick and he tries to whack it. Everything else that sport is what we give it.
Yep.
We give it all that context, and a lot of that comes from the tribalist, nature that you're talking about.
So, like, do you feel cricket would eventually move down the route of, let's say, what football has become, with aspects of franchises or clubs becoming bigger than national teams, even in the supporter base they get, in the revenues they pool? through the matches that are often channeled all around the year. Do you feel cricket will eventually go down that route with finances coming in, or do you feel very much with your documentary film, Death of a Gentleman, that it will still be the heavyweights who would still control it and want to have international cricket be the epitome of cricket for however long?
I think market forces generally win. And I think that we can make a lot more money from Test cricket and international cricket than we do. I think it is currently run in a way that limits it. So, for instance, at the moment, if you were looking at where you would invest, you would invest all your money in franchise cricket, but that's only because they haven't run international cricket correctly. There is a way to make, I would say, billions more dollars out of Test cricket than they currently run it. I won't get into the specifics, but basically, you sell it as a package rather than an individual series. That is not going away. I always look at it in this particular way. We are a long way done in the history of McDonald's, right? But the Big Mac is still the Big Mac.
Yep.
It may not be their biggest seller anymore, but Big Mac is synonymous with what McDonald's is. And they can sell as many salads as they want. And they can give kids fruit packages and whatever. But we know when it comes down to it, McDonald's is a burger and fries and a drink. And they nailed that. And they're always going to have nailed that. That doesn't mean that their business won't diversify. And that might become a smaller part. But the Big Mac is always going to be worth a certain amount of money. International cricket is always going to be worth a lot of money. Because if for nothing else, every time India, Pakistan play each other, that's going to be worth a lot of money. But also because World Cup football is worth a lot of money. And the World Cup of basketball is getting big. I mean, they've just renamed, it was called the FIBA World Championship up until recently. Basketball's like, we need a World Cup. We're going to call it the World Cup. That will be worth more money. We know that these other things, these other major sports are worth more and more money. So it would be silly for cricket to get rid of a part of revenue. The problem is that no one's in charge. And so with no one in charge, that's where the danger comes in. But there will be more franchise cricket. My guess is that they won't have a long IPL season. What they will try and do is have 2 IPL seasons, maybe eventually try and join them up 10, 15 years down the line. Other leagues will work this out as well. But the audience is not trained for that yet. So if you were to make the IPL 6 months right now, I honestly think it would flop.
Yeah.
And I don't mean flop in a way that it would go bankrupt and it would stop playing. I just think that the revenues would it wouldn't be worth it, if that makes sense. Big Bash tried to expand, and Big Bash was, for what it was a very, very successful small tournament. They expanded it, and they've had so many troubles since they've done that. Cricket fans aren't ready for that week in, week out thing. That's not why we follow cricket or how we follow cricket. We follow it for tours and for series. The IPL and the Big Bash mimic that at the moment.
Yep.
If you make it a longer franchise heavy system, I wonder if that will change things a little bit. And also, you got to remember that South Africa aren't going to be able to do that. Pakistan maybe can do that. Sri Lanka aren't going to be able to do that. New Zealand aren't going to be able to do that. The West Indies, I could go on and on and on, right? Those other places are still going to have to keep playing. So, it's very interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah. So, I mean, touching upon that, like, don't you feel another difficulty there would be something, because in India, there's this whole Ranji Trophy system and a whole domestic cricket system, which then pools players that go on to play for India and go on to play for these IPL teams. So do you feel that that's going to be a difficulty as well, be it with the Big Bash or any of these domestic leagues we're talking about, that the development will still have to be done, and then even if there are 10 IPL teams playing for 6 months, is that even enough for all the players that come through in India or Australia or wherever?
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing, I mean, it's cricket is run so poorly. I've actually just done a podcast on Red Inker about how bad the T20 structures are. And so you think about it from this point of view. At this stage, they'll only own their players for 2 months.
Yeah.
They do have some more development stuff coming through, but you own them for 2 months. Let's say you have them for another 3 months of training, right? So 5 months of the year, an IPL player is getting lots of money, but then they go back to their state or their province or their zone. They work with other coaches, other things come in. Those sorts of problems are already hugely prevalent within cricket. And they've always been there within cricket because that has always happened internationally. And that's one of the reasons that Cricket Australia originally brought in the centralized contracts, so they could control their players, so that when the guy that they want to bowl first change goes back to Shield cricket, he's not opening the bowling again.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be able to say, no, we're in charge. He bowls here, and this is why he bowls here. This is how we want him to develop. And you see that in England now as well, and India starting to do a similar thing. Because of all these random leagues and how it works, it's not there. The whole development of cricket is so interesting. The best way for India, for instance, to do this is to get rid of contracts that they've got, allow their players to be able to sign long-term contracts, but also make the IPL contracts for Indian players 12 months a year. We are willing to loan out our player to Mumbai. We are willing to loan out our player to, Chennai or whoever it is, and they're allowed to have them for club cricket, for Ranji cricket, for whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But we develop them, and we're telling you, if you he has to bat at number 5. We know that in your team he should open, but he's on our contract. That's the kind of how it should work. And if you look at the NBA, they've got a really good model, and minor league baseball is quite a good model of this as well, where you have development leagues. We have no development leagues. We just have all these random leagues that call it a crisscross and whatever. And so development is a huge problem within cricket at the moment, and we should have these sort of 12-month contracts. I mean, if you look at what the younger Indian players are getting paid, there's no reason why you can't double their pay and allow them to be 12 months of the year contracted to you. They can still make their money from those other things, but you have to develop them. And this is a problem kind of right across, like really interesting one. If you look at it, like Australia, Josh Philippe needs to be a middle order batsman for Australia, right? That's what Australia need him to be. Sorry to get too cricket nerdy on you here, but that's what Australia cricket needs. They don't need another opening batsman, but he's so good that his T20 franchise had to push him up the order, right? Now he's in the IPL and he's lucky enough that they don't want him as an opener, and he'll go back to the middle order and he'll get some experience. But the truth is that is not how NFL, that is not how top level sports should be doing things. There should be a structure, but because there's no structure in anything in cricket, the development of players is terrible. Now, the other interesting thing that you're talking about, that your question brings up, is that if you think about this from a very if you were a sniper, if you were Elon Musk, right? So Elon Musk is South African. My guess is he grew up around cricket. He might not have played it, but my guess is he grew up around it. Let's say he suddenly remembers that he's the world's biggest cricket fan, right? He has enough money that he could buy all of the top 200 cricketers in the world, go off and form any kind of league he wants. He could have 3 months of the year a test league, 3 months of the year a one-day league, and 6 months of the year a ultimate T20 league, right? All the best players in the world. They'd all go. I'm talking $100 million to David Warner, $200 million to Virat Kohli, $20 million to Corey Anderson. He could do whatever he wanted, right? There's enough money, he would make his money back if he did that, right? Then the whole rest of the world of cricket becomes a development league for Elon Musk, right? And if that sounds ridiculous, that's essentially the way that ice hockey works.
Yeah.
That's essentially how darts work in America, in England, sorry. There are sports that are like, they have all this development stuff and they get their players better, and then those players go off to a big league and you never see them again.
Yeah.
There's no reason why this couldn't happen. Cricket is run so poorly that those sort of things could. So we don't develop our talent enough. We don't scour for talent enough. I mean, there's the whole east of India has produced a handful of first-class cricketers. Like, you're telling me that somehow that they don't have cricketers there? I mean, that without it being because of apartheid, that's a bit like saying, oh, they're just black cricketers aren't very good in South Africa. And then Basil D'Oliveira comes along and everyone goes, maybe they can play, right? It's a similar sort of thing. And you see it with, Australian, how many Australian Indigenous players were missing. And some of these things are racial and some of these things are geographical. And there's many different reasons why these different things happen. But realistically, cricket doesn't even get, I would say that cricket is probably working on about 35% of its overall. I mean, maybe that's being friendly because of the way that India and Pakistan go. It's maybe working on about 8% of the overall talent it should be developing. It is developing. It's a ridiculous situation.
So with one of the things you touched upon there, with, let's say, if we give the IPL teams the opportunity of having their players for, let's say, a 12-month period, do you feel they will only produce one sort of player? They'll only produce, let's say, T20 players that be good for those sort of competitions. And the question I'm trying to pose here is that, do you feel that eventually we would have, let's say, T20 specialists? So India will have a T20 only team. So those be 11 players who are only T20 specialists. Then they'll have
Look,
an ODI team.
yeah. I
And
don't know where cricket's going, honestly, because no one's in charge and no one's really looking after this stuff. What I would say is this: how many forms of racing car driving are there? And all of those racing car drivers, someone who's in the Indy 500 or who's in a drag race or who's in Le Mans or who's in Dakar, they all probably have the basic skills that they could change to their other sports. They could go and do those other things, right? But once you sort of get into one, you generally stick. I know there's a little bit of switching over. We have created 3 and certainly 2 completely distinctive formats of cricket, which do need different skill sets. Now, I saw Chris Lynn as a young guy. I still believe Chris Lynn in the right environment and Nicholas Pooran in the right environment would be phenomenal test players. And there's lots of guys out there like that. Then there are guys like Harry Gurney and Benny Howell and Samuel Badgery, who would never really have been red ball cricketers, right?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of guys out there who are out there, and it is that you should do. But essentially, you are going to chase where you think your financial worth is now as a player. There will continue to be players who master all 3 formats in an AB de Villiers way because they are so much better than everyone else. But is there an environment that happens one day where there is no need for them to do that? Right? Possibly. And you might also have a situation like there is a crossover between American football, rugby league, and rugby union, where the basic skills that you have actually are quite go over. So rugby league and rugby union quite often has players go back and forth. It's almost very similar sports. Occasionally you see guys go off and play American football or come back from American football and go to one of the rugby codes as well. That kind of split, there's no reason why that can't happen in cricket. If we had an incredible governing body who was making sure that all forms of cricket were firing and going ahead, maybe we could work out how to keep them all together. But we don't. And when it comes down to it, that's not going to happen. And so eventually, I would assume that players will start to do that. If I was a young player now, I would be whatever my main skills were towards. I would spend all my time practicing on that.
Yeah.
Because there's still many good first-class careers out there to be had. And also, let's say you're a really good first-class cricketer right at the moment, and you have a little bit of T20 skill, and you might not ever be able to make a lot of money off it. Be like, well, all the really talented guys are going off to T20. Might as well. Maybe I've got more of a chance if I'm in red ball cricket.
Yeah. See, the problem I feel what would happen here is that if you look at Hong Kong, they're almost so used to the T10 format that, let's say, T20 format would almost seem alien to them because that's what they've grown up with in that sense. Afghanistan in that sense, where if you've initiated limited overs cricket in that sense, it becomes really difficult for them to then play a test match against India. We just saw how they just absolutely got battered against India. And obviously there's a difference in class, but if they aren't being provided with that opportunity to play test match cricket from a young age, let's say in terms of the country, then I feel then that there is a problem there.
Yes, but if all the most talented Indian players go off to play T20 as well, then there will be a second-tier Indian test team playing a second-tier Afghanistan test team at a certain level. Do you know what I mean? So to play out what you're saying, eventually it comes to that level. And also Afghanistan is supposed to lose to India. Like there is a class difference.
Yeah, true.
And new test teams, it took New Zealand 39 years to win their first test series. I think we look at Bangladesh and go, why aren't they better? And it's like Sri Lanka and Pakistan were fluke cases, really. In normal terms, it should take you a very long time to win a test match or win test series. You win a test match, but not a series. So I think what could happen though is that there is certainly a strong Red Bull culture in Afghanistan as well, and you've got a few guys coming through that are maybe Red Bull specialists that will go on, I think, to be quite good at that form of the game. But realistically, like, there's only so much cricket talent in the world that we've uncovered. Yeah. So Pakistan, who are we talking about? Afghanistan can only uncover so much talent, right? If the top 40 players all go off to T20 cricket, which is always a possibility, it probably won't be exactly the top 40. It'll probably be 40 of the top 50 that will go off to play. And the same thing happens in India and the same thing happens in New Zealand. Then there will be almost a normal equilibrium of what happens to Test cricket then anyway, if that makes sense. So that will still happen. As long as there is a money for Test cricket, which I certainly believe there is, and there certainly should be a lot more of it than there currently is. Certainly Test cricket should never run at a loss. While there is money out there and you can continue to make money off it, there is absolutely no reason why the talented players won't still go to it. It may not be the Grand Prix. It may be the V8s in Australia, right? In comparison, like a much lower level of car racing. But there's still going to be talented people going through, and they'll be suited to that for whatever reason, and they'll go to it. So I'm not too worried about that, because the thing is that we, as sports fans, we kind of think that that we can tell if a league is better or worse than it is. You go and check now. All these people around the world are saying, the quality of Test cricket is really low at the moment. The quality of Test cricket across the top 10 nations has never been anywhere near this high. Right? 3 years ago, everyone was telling me that Test cricket was really dull and really terrible, and the bowlers were being ground out of the game. The last 2 years, the bowlers have dominated in a way that they haven't for 100 years.
Yeah.
Right? These things come in waves. You can't really tell. All you can see is that it doesn't matter. Let's look at a sport like netball. How many great netballers have been lost to basketball over the years, right? How many great volleyballers have been lost to basketball over the years? Sports pilfer from each other all the time. The only thing that's different here is we can see that other guy's just made 100 in a T20 match on a tricky pitch, and we can think to ourselves, wow, I wonder what he could have done if he'd played in red ball cricket. It's kind of a nonsense at a certain level. Test cricket is stronger now than it has ever been. The 80s and 90s is the only comparable era to what we have now, and we didn't have 10 teams who were of this quality back then. We have a phenomenal talent pool of Test cricket right now that we did not have in the 60s and 70s. We just didn't have it. We had a handful of good teams. Up until 1975, essentially only 2 teams had ever dominated cricket, and maybe South Africa was about to be the third, right? We have now had India be number 1. Pakistan be number 1. South Africa be number 1. We've had Sri Lanka play incredible cricket. We're in a much better situation than we've ever been. And yet, if T20 cricket gets strong, everyone goes, oh, well, it's weak in Test cricket. It's like, I'm not sure I buy that. And also, there are ways to fix that anyway, as I said. But I think a lot of that is just sort of nonsensical stuff that sports fans do because they don't look at the wider picture.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed your film, Death of a Gentleman. I feel it's so profound in the stuff you guys actually talk about. So does that make you frustrated as a sports fan, as a journalist, as a cricket lover even, to see how, as you mentioned, that there isn't really a proper structure in place of how they want to run things of the beautiful game? So yeah, it's just that, like, does it make you frustrated? And if so, like, what can we do to increase participation? And is making cricket an Olympic sport a bad idea in that sense, because it brings so many more countries in the picture?
I mean, I did a video on my YouTube channel recently. Cricket at the Olympics would be one of the greatest things that has ever happened at cricket. Firstly, it was at the second Olympics.
Just to intrude you there, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I think it was the 2011 London Olympics. In the opening ceremony, they depicted cricket as one of the sports that were there, even though cricket isn't being played in the 2011 London Olympics, just to depict a sort of Englishness and a sort of way sport begun, basically, in England, in that sense.
Yeah. Well, cricket started before the modern Olympics. Yeah. I mean, international cricket was well before. W.G. Grace was potentially the biggest sports star on earth before the modern Olympics was even brought back, right? Canada were playing, the USA, Ireland were playing, Argentina was playing. Cricket was a global sport. Cricket went out of its way to screw itself over as a sport, especially when it came up with things like you have to be to play Test cricket and all these sort of nonsensical rules. But it had already started to kill off those other teams anyway. Cricket did play in the Olympics. In the second Olympics, England beat France in what was a bit of a ridiculous. I don't think either team knew they were actually playing in the Olympics at the time.
Wasn't that match in Paris or something?
Yeah, Paris Olympics. There was also two other teams that were supposed to play. One that I pulled out at the last minute, I think. So cricket has been in the Olympics before. Here's why it matters, right? It doesn't matter to the Indian men's team. It doesn't matter to the English men's team. It doesn't matter to the Australian men's team. It probably doesn't matter to the Sri Lankan, South African men's teams, right? It matters incredibly to all women cricketers. The amount of extra funding, the amount of extra support that would come in. Think about this. You've got a Sri Lankan team that is not a bad women's team. They suddenly think, we're a sneaky chance of a bronze medal here. They are going to be funded and turned into a far more professional outfit straight away. So that is incredibly important for women's sport. And then you've got the associate nations. You know, I remember Cricket Ireland, when they were fighting the ICC, the Irish government would turn to Cricket Ireland and go, your own sport doesn't want you. Why would we help you? That wouldn't be the case if the Olympics were involved. We also know that there are countries like China and Kenya and all those sorts of places. I mean, Kenya made a World Cup semi-final. Now, it was a bit of a fluky effort and there are many different things, but they were a good cricket team. They produced good cricketers. They are a proper cricket nation. They're not a bad cricket team now. It's just that everyone else, all the other associates have gone past them. Again, you tell Kenya that you can qualify for the Olympics. There's a reason for the government to support them again. So the associate nations, we already know that. And we already know that, the Brazilian women's cricket team is professional. The Thai women's cricket team is very nearly professional. And if not, if it isn't now, it will be very shortly. Singapore played brilliantly at the men's World T20. All these places, they don't need much more money to start being good cricket nations. Hong Kong had one decent run because they had a good coach, a good general manager, they had good administration off the field, and they got to a World T20, right? It doesn't take a lot to make a big difference in cricket in a short thing. So there's women and associates, right? How about this? The ICC still doesn't run disability cricket. Not only do they not run disability cricket, when they had a physically disabled World Cup in the UK last year, they weren't able to call it a World Cup because the ICC owned the rights to that term. Wow. They couldn't call it a World Cup. 5 teams turned up, right? Disability cricket is an absolute schmozzle. You've got blind cricket doing their own thing, deaf cricket doing their own thing, physical disability cricket doing their own thing, mental disability cricket doing their own thing. No, there is no team that I'm aware of outside of India, and the India disability cricket is a world of its own, but there's no team outside of India that actually have a team that played in the last World Cup of all those, of the 3 major events. I don't think India had mental disability. So even England and Australia aren't putting 4 disability teams out for World Cups, right?
Yeah.
What would the Paralympics do for that? It would be incredible what they could do for that. It would be such an incredible boost for disability cricket. ICC could no longer ignore them. They would not be allowed to. They probably would have to actually sign something with the IOC that says you look after them. Yeah. Oh my God, what cricket could be done. Every year and a half, someone writes a big article or someone does an interview with or goes out and plays cricket with a blindfold on against blind cricketers, right? And occasionally, you had that English player whose leg came off and he still fielded the ball and threw it in from the boundary that made Sports Center in America. And we do nothing for disability cricket as a sport. The Olympics has the ability to change the face of what cricket is, and it will do the very basic thing that cricket has never managed on itself, make itself an accessible game to everyone. Cricket is not an accessible game, and that is not good enough.
Do you think the only thing that's stopping is just geopolitics in that sense of the major countries not really wanting some other teams, some other associate teams, some other developmental teams to take part in it?
Do
because
you
it's
mean
just,
the Olympics or do you mean in general?
in general, really, like
I think
like
England and Australia went out of their way to not let countries come in. I think that's true. There's no reason why the USA and
yeah,
Ireland and Argentina weren't test nations, for instance. Um, so that started very early on, right? Cricket was and is run as a gentleman's club. You have to be invited in. You have to dress right and be from the right kind of family and invited in. That's where it starts. You then have this modern play, which is that India like being the biggest country in cricket. They certainly enjoy the power that wields. England and Australia, up till very recently, enjoyed being in that big three with India, and they were just as complicit. The other smaller countries also are all part of that. On a very basic level, the most obvious thing that should happen is that the money pool from the ICC event should be split for the 105 cricket nations. Maybe not, 100% squarely, but far more squarely, because each individual nation should be making enough money from their bilateral events that they don't need that one big windfall from the ICC. Because they're not doing that, they're all fighting amongst themselves. So you've got three power-hungry teams at the top, and the teams underneath them are no better and sometimes worse than them in their corruption, in their ineptitude, in their lack of vision for the game. Perfect example is the best way for Test cricket to really go forward in the short term would have been 14 teams, 7 in Division 1 and 7 in Division 2. Everyone knows that from a logical standpoint. But West Indies and Sri Lanka were terrified of what that would mean if they went to Division 2. Now, what I would say is get better, invest in your local players, work out how to beat these other teams. Make sure you're not in Division 2. That is what sport is about. You are not supposed to get membership to Division 1 in, when was, I'm trying to think, when was South Africa's first test? 1889, right? You're not supposed to get membership in 1889 to the top level of sport and have it for the rest of your life, no matter how bad you are. You're supposed to earn it every single time. Carl Lewis is not still going to the Olympics because he was once the world's best runner, right? That's not how sport works. And we've created a sport where that is how it works.
yeah,
So these boards, they know also, Sri Lanka know that could happen to them and they could become less relevant. Don't be shit then.
yeah.
Don't ignore your cricketers. Don't ignore half the island who are really good at cricket. Go up to the north and try and find the. There was a woman who I interviewed recently from Jaffna. She is a 6'11" netballer, right? Right? You can't tell me there aren't incredible athletes up in the north of Sri Lanka that they have missed out on because they don't look for their cricketers up there. Stop looking at your posh schools in Colombo and Kandy. Open up your eyes and look out. Develop your players. If Iceland can make the bloody Euros, right, from a small playing pool and being very clever with their little bit of money, Sri Lanka love cricket. They have a passion for cricket. They've got brilliant cricketers. They play, I'd say, the level of street cricket in Sri Lanka is as high as I've seen anywhere, higher than I've seen in any other developed cricket nation, right? Oh my God. Don't be afraid. Attack it. But that's apparently not how we run cricket. And so you do these things, and then there are political things. There's also like little stupid things. Like for ages, no one will push Olympics together because they were terrified that the West Indies would be upset because they wouldn't be able to play as the West Indies. It's like, well, England wouldn't be able to play as England either. They'd have to play as Team GB. You'd have Ireland would have had to be split up because that's North and South Island, well, Ireland and North Ireland.
Yeah.
And when they talked to the islands in the West Indies, they were like, yeah, no, that's fine. We get it. We did it for the Commonwealth Games. We can do that again. You just just stupid things. And then England will say, well, we can't lose 2 weeks of our, a month of our summer every 4 years. Fuck off. I'm sorry, but fuck off. If this helps the entire game, if you guys really love the game of cricket, you will give up 1 month.
Yeah.
Every 4 years. If you don't want to take it seriously, if you want it to be under 23 or under 27 or amateur or whatever the fuck you want to be, I don't care. Get cricket in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Allow these other developing nations to get funding, to get support. Allow these women to play as professionals. Allow these women to have as good facilities as this men, and bring disability cricket into the fold.
I just see so many similarities to what's proposed in football in that sense with the European Super League, of these elite clubs wanting to have a club of their own and sort of not even worrying about relegation and promotion in that sense. So they could stick to that pool and just make money amongst themselves. And then the domestic leagues can be seen as, let's say, almost feeder leagues for these
Yeah.
elite clubs in that
They'll
sense.
just they'll just pick,
Yeah.
Brentford will do really well, and and they'll just skim off the top, won't they? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
some Spanish club will come up with a great new coaching style and skim off the top. The idea is that in sport that you should be compensated for the skill and the work ethic and what you do. That is not how cricket is run. Right? I remember a great moment when the Big Three takeover was happening and the dinguses were up being forced to defend the indefensible, and also it wasn't their idea, right? And they're up on stage, and Usman Samiuddin is there, and Usman says, other than the fact that India, Australia, and England come from the biggest media markets and are the richest countries in cricket, what makes you think that their boards are better than other boards? There's nothing that says that Cricket Island, for a long period of time, wasn't one of the most well-run boards in cricket. You could make a very good argument that New Zealand cricket was one of the better-run boards in cricket for a very long time, right? And they weren't involved in how cricket should be reshaped. The three richest. You and I could run Indian cricket and make billions of dollars. Cricket Australia has made mistake after mistake after mistake. I still think they're a very good run for cricket. They're still a very good run board. They're not geniuses.
Yeah.
They're certainly not geniuses. COVID, none of their cricket was even cancelled in COVID, and they lost all their money, right? They're having Channel 7 run them roughshod at the moment over the fact that there's no reason for that to happen. England cricket has almost bankrupted itself on a tournament that may not work. That hasn't happened yet, right? These aren't geniuses. It's just that if you're paying 80 quid for a test ticket in England,
wow, yeah.
If you're paying, $8 million per match to show an Indian match in India, if you can get 84,000 people into the MCG, you're going to make some money, man. You're going to make some money. It doesn't mean that you're any better at what you do. And, it's kind of ridiculous that we're in this sort of situation, that we've allowed ourselves to be in it. But it's a gentleman-run sport, and the richest gentlemen get their way, and we've allowed that for too long. And now we're in a point where cricket should be unarguably the second biggest sport in the world by now.
Yeah.
It could even, I don't think it would ever get past football, but they should be mentioned in the same thing. But realistically, you could make a very solid claim that American football, that basketball, that tennis, many other sports are the second biggest sport in the world, and it's not cricket. And that's ridiculous, because cricket was there 100 years before anyone else even knew how to pull on shorts.
Yeah. And it just shows with the revenue pool with these tennis players and basketballers make as well. So even if basketball isn't the biggest sport when you compare it to football, so the mind the basketball players are making is almost as good as what the top footballers are making, or even sometimes more with LeBron James. Yeah.
Yeah, those sorts of things. But basketball is a really interesting sport. Basketball went out of its way in the 80s to make itself a global sport in a way that cricket never, ever has. Cricket will say it, but cricket has never tried to. Basketball did this incredible thing. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was called NBA Action with Ahmad Rashad. And if you're a basketball fan from outside of America, chances are your love of basketball came via that show, right? And they would either sell the rights or sometimes just donate games for free to broadcasters, right? To show. They would have, they would spread it. They spread it to Australia. They spread it to China. They're now trying to spread it to India because they're not idiots, right? Yeah. And they went out of the way. Now that's a league, right? So it does run differently than what cricket is, which is a gentleman's club. But the basic premise there is, have a look at how many countries on earth basketball is the number one sport in. It just isn't. No, it's very rare for basketball to be the number one sport. Yeah. I'm trying to think of too many countries. Maybe the Philippines. No, I can't. I'm not trying to think of where. Maybe probably the Philippines.
Yes, isn't it?
Sorry?
Probably the US.
No, it's not the number one sport in the US. American football would be much bigger than it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not even the number one sport in the place that invented it, let alone anywhere else, right?
I know,
And yet,
I know it's big in Spain, but it's not obviously as big as football. But yeah,
exactly. It's big in lots of places. It's, big in Australia. It's big in China. It's big in it's big in Brazil, but there's always another sport that
yeah,
trumps it, right?
yeah.
And yet, look at how powerful basketball is and how much bigger basketball is getting and how many more countries are involved and how strong international basketball is now. It wasn't that long ago that if you watched an NBA game, a white guy would come off the bench, shoot a couple of three-pointers and disappear. Now you've got Luka and the Joker and, major NBA stars because Europe has just been sucked into basketball to such a way from probably the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Some of it from that, NBA action and pushing the game and making it a cultural part of your life. I'll tell you what, cricket and basketball, golf is about the only other one, I reckon. They are major cultural moments. If you're a cricketer, it is a part of your cultural identity, right? In a way that being a football fan might be, but not being a footballer is. If you're a golfer, that's part of your cultural identity. You're wearing the stupid shirts around, and that sort of thing. Cycling has become another one. But cricket and basketball are two of the first sports that really have that. Cricket has made nothing of this. The whole cultural side of cricket has never gone anywhere. Basketball just keeps pushing it. And as basketball morphs into different things, right? Whether it be the European thing or the Chinese thing or just the way that black culture in America shapes it, basketball's like, well, we're going to go there now.
Yeah.
We're going to be the woke league now. We're going to be doing this now. We're going to be doing that. We're going to have a women's league. Like, where's the NFL's WNBA? WNBA is a really strong league. It's not as strong as it should be. Most people around the world are aware that if they follow basketball, there is a WNBA, right? That is not the case with most women's sport out there. They are really good at pushing those sorts of things and following the culture and the music and all that sort of stuff. Do you know what cricket has? It has an incredible literature and music history.
Yeah.
Right? That goes back. Herbert Chang was a West Indian cricketer, also released reggae songs. Mark Butcher is a musician. Even Brett Lee with his stupid stuff, right? A lot of this, we have a musical history within cricket. We have a literature. We have cricketers able to write incredible literature about themselves in a way that other sports never had.
Yeah.
We don't play that up. We don't. It's just we're very shit.
Yeah. No, I can understand that, and it's really warranted in the way things are on there. But I really want to talk about cricket writing because I feel you're one of the early cricket writers who started writing more about societal aspects about cricket when even if you were reporting cricket and talking about cricket, just connecting it to societal aspects, which often which often isn't the case. So I was speaking to Amit Sinha, the chat I mentioned earlier as well, and he said that you were really bold in the stuff you put out there. So let's say cricket with balls or something like that as a blog, whereas it's seen traditionally as a Victorian style way of writing about the sport, watching the sport, consuming the sport. So could you talk to me a little bit about that, of how cricket writing has evolved over the years?
Yeah, I mean, cricket has this great reputation as being a literary sport, and I think it is. And I think that we maybe haven't had as many great books as we should have, but certainly if you go back and read the, Ray Robinsons and Neville Carduses and those sorts of guys, I may not agree with most things that Cardus wrote, but there's certainly, you can tell that they were writing about cricket in a way that people weren't writing about football at that time. Boxing's probably the only one that sort of compares. And then the problem is that became the all-consuming style, this sort of romanticism. It was always under a baking sun. The clouds had come in. It's a very interesting thing. I mean, American sports writing had this huge, awakening in 1920s, 1930s with Grantland and those sorts of people. And I think they were very inspired by England, but they made it more about the people. There's a very poetic way that cricket writing was written about, which was good, but the one thing that they missed was the cricket. Incredible things happen in cricket that haven't been reported on. Put it this way. Go back and try and find the great reports of when Franklin Stevenson first bowled the off-cutter slower ball. You can't get a ball that's bowled more often in limited overs cricket than the off-cutter slower ball now. Go back and read the reports on the games that he was playing in and doing that. Where are the big interviews? Where was this is an interesting development in cricket. The other thing was that because it was all written from an England point of view, everything was written to report back to an English audience.
Yeah.
Right? Australia did well. Australia's the only one that probably has had something outside of that. But the majority of cricket writing was written to go back to an England audience, which means that you missed another side of what was going on there. You missed. There's a really interesting line. I'm trying to remember who the writer is. I think it's David Frith, where he's writing about Sri Lanka's first test. Incredible test match where they almost beat England. And his final line, if I remember correctly, is something like, and the baby was born healthy and screaming. And I can't remember the exact line, but it's like that. But it's misunderstanding what that moment meant to the Sri Lankans. There's an empathy missing, which David Frith had when he wrote about people killing themselves in Silence of the Hearts. And other cricket writers clearly had when they were writing about individual stories. But there's an empathy missing in, why is this cricket culture like this?
Yeah.
Why? I don't think enough was written outside of India about what 1983 meant. You'll hear so many people say 1983 changed cricket forever, which it did. You won't hear as many people go through the kind of details of where India was before and where India was afterwards.
I think there's this great Indian historian, Ramchandra Guha, who wrote the Kanti. I think he's recently. I'm not sure if he's published it already or it's going to be out in a couple of months. So he's going to write. He's writing about cricket in the colonial age in British India in that sense.
Yeah, but he's a historian, right?
Yeah.
And also, the year's 2020. We missed. To make it really obvious, the first, probably the longest innings in Test match history, I think certainly in minutes and days played, I don't know if we have the full ball count of it, is Hanif Mohammed versus West Indies. Next test, or in that same series, I forget if it was the next test or the one after that, Garfield Sobers breaks the world record, right? So we have the longest innings that's ever been made and the highest scoring innings.
Yeah.
Go back and try and find the original writings on that. There's not much, right? There is a real lack of interest in the way that cricket was written about outside of your country. So English cricket, I can tell you about Seymour Clarke, who played 5 first-class games for Somerset as a wicketkeeper and never made a run, right? That's how much I know about Seymour Clarke, right? I know that he was a train driver. I know that the first time he kept in first-class cricket, he went up to the stumps and they went, you can't do that here, man. This guy's a bit too quick for that, right? I know that he bought a new bat. That's how well covered Seymour Clarke is, right? Then you've got someone like Charlie Llewellyn. Charlie Llewellyn is essentially the first non-white player to play for South Africa, and he plays in the 1890s. He got away with it because he looked white, essentially, even though he wasn't white. He just, he had mixed race parents. Sorry, he had one black parent and one white parent. And as pigmentation sometimes happens, he looked white enough that they just went, he can play. From Hendricks, you're a bit too dark. You can't play. This guy can play. We know a little bit about Charlie Llewellyn. Like a little, right? There was this lack of trying to put all these things into context and how important all these sorts of things are. And that has been the whole history of cricket. So anything England related, we have too much. There's a new book written about Yorkshire cricket every 8 minutes, right? There isn't. Where is the long read on how South Africa dominated cricket and without winning at home all the time and with that incredible team? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't exist. So I just looked at all of this as an outsider and went, well, I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to try and write this piece. I want to write about Scottish cricket team played in 2015 World Cup, and it was quite clear that they were a good team, and it just wasn't all coming together for them. There was something there. They maybe weren't quite good enough, but there was something there, and they were being let down by the people who ran Scottish cricket at that time, in my opinion. Now I work for Scottish cricket. They may disagree with me, but that's how I felt then about that era. So I can go off and write that. And I wrote 7,000 words on the Scottish cricket team in 2015. That piece is always going to be there. It's always going to be a touchstone for Scottish cricket. That's what should be written about all these different things, right? That's what needed to be there. Cricket with Balls allowed me to get my foot in the door, but it allowed me to write about whatever I wanted that was interesting within cricket because no one was telling me not to. So by the time I got to ESPN and Cricinfo, they'd be like, oh, maybe you should write this. And I'd be like, no, I'm writing this.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, well, if you're going to write that, then you have to write about Virat Kohli. Fine, I'll do your Virat Kohli piece. Now I'm off to watch Hong Kong versus the Netherlands in Hong Kong. Now I'm going to write a piece about the Hong Kong women's captain being the first ever native Chinese player, a full-blooded native Chinese player to lead a Hong Kong cricket team, right? And they're like, no, that's what I'm doing. That's the trade-off, right? That's how we have to write about cricket. There's still not enough written about Nepal cricket. There's still not enough written about Papua New Guinea cricket. There's still not enough written about Kenyan cricket, women's cricket, all these sorts of things. But we're getting there. And the internet has democratized that and has allowed us to, the Brazilian women's captain I follow on Twitter. One day I'm just going to, I'll get in touch with her. Then I'll get in touch with a bunch of the players. Then I might put something together from that. How did they become professional before they're men? Incredible story, right? And it's already been written, but I might want to write a different angle or a further angle or what happened 3 years after they became professional, whatever it is. It's that drive that I have that other cricket fans didn't have because a lot of cricket writers before me grew up in their cricket culture, right? I happen to be that my obsession with cricket was never just about Australian cricket. Mm-hmm. It was about Pakistani cricket, a little bit about West Indies cricket, a little bit about Indian cricket. Then the internet explodes. And Cricinfo, I can read anything.
Yeah.
I can check how Rahul Dravid's been going in Ranji Trophy if I need to. Do you know what I mean? That all exploded at once and it came together. And now, because of a bunch of, it helps that I'm a white male Australian in that space. But that also then allows for non-white Australian males behind me to come up and do what they do as well. Because there's now there's a nearest neighbor and I have shown that I can do what I do, and then other people will come through, and you hope to inspire people to look for the most interesting things. I mean, if you're a cricket writer and you only want to write about RCB, Virat Kohli, and Rohit Sharma, I mean, I'm not saying people won't read it. I'm just saying, why? What is the point of that? There is so much interesting stuff out there. And so I think that all came from that spirit of that blog and what it was. Mm-hmm. And then the freedom. And then also, we talked about it before, I was hired for Cricinfo to do video. By the time they realized I was doing all this other stuff, 2012 World T20, I went there and I didn't have a full-time job. I was there to record videos. And I was just like, I'm going to belt this series out of the park. And I went up to Sambit, he wasn't even my boss at that point. Sambit was running Cricinfo and I said, I'm going to cover the women's games like they're men's games. I was just like, he was like, oh, okay, why not? Good idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as that. So there are proper reports written on those semi-finals and final that there might not have been written had I not done that. You don't have to work for Cricinfo to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially now. So those sorts of things are available to other people, I think, and it's certainly something that I would want to push to other people. And this is not just cricket. This is out everywhere. There are people go, I don't know what to write about. And I was like, then you're not paying attention. If you don't know what to write about, you're not paying attention. There are so many things out there. So I was right person at the right time. I'm just loud enough and obnoxious enough. And I had other skills as well, which is quite handy, that it was almost kind of hard for Cricinfo to say no because they weren't paying attention. And the first time I wrote a feature from the ground, and David Hops was the UK editor. Australia had picked Agar over Nathan Lyon, which was a travesty of cricket.
Yeah.
And I basically said, the problem isn't that Australia is trying to replace Shane Warne. The problem is that They think there is another Shane Warne out there and that they will find another Shane Warne. And so they're going through them. So I went through the entire history of people who had been burnt, good cricketers who'd been burnt by Australian cricket because they weren't Shane Warne. And it was, as you might expect, 3,500 words, 4,000 words, right? And I filed this from the ground. And I get a call at 8 o'clock at night. And I had told them that it was going to be long, but I don't think they quite understood what long meant from me at that point. And Hopsy said, "You are the most selfish writer I've ever come across. I cannot believe you would do this. Who do you think you are?" Screaming at me down the phone. A week later, we're having dinner, and I've done another piece like this for the second test. And Hopsy's there, Sambert's there. I think George Dobell might have been at the dinner. And George and Hopsy says to me, "This is great. You've got to do one of these every test now." You kind of create those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, I wrote an 8,000 word piece on Asif Karim, a Kenyan cricketer that no one had thought about in 20 years or 15 years by that point, right? I wrote an 8,000 word piece on a guy who never even made it to the top level of Afghanistani cricket, who ended up playing cricket in Kansas,
Wow.
right? You create that by finding those stories and by developing those relationships and by nailing them when you get them. When you get that chance, you have to nail them. If you don't, they won't let you do it again. Mm-hmm. If that first time you get that really good story and they say, and you send it in and it's a bit wishy-washy, or there's too much information in it, or there are whole parts that don't need to be in it at all, they might not let you do it again. You have to get it right. You have to find that story. But there is a whole world of cricket out there that needs to be discussed and should be discussed, and unfortunately gets overlooked. And I think what the internet has allowed us to do is to find all those and give us access to those people in a way that we didn't have before. And so, as much as cricket writing is better now than it's ever been, it's better now than it's ever been because Stats Guru exists, because Cricinfo exists, because CricBuzz exists, because Twitter exists, because LinkedIn exists, all those sorts of things. YouTube exists, CricInGIF when that was doing well. All of those things help you be a better cricket writer in a way. So I am just the right person at the right time from that sort of point of view.
Do you feel that there is a right way and a wrong way to write about cricket or report about cricket? We talked about this. You talked about this essence of how some nations, how some players aren't getting covered enough. Obviously, that we looked at. But do you feel just in a journalistic point of view that is there a right way or a wrong way of writing about cricket? If someone wants to write about more societal aspects that one can link towards from cricket towards society, I guess that's fine. If someone wants to go ball by ball and report on every single thing, I feel that's fine. So in my opinion, I don't feel there's a right or wrong way, but I would love to hear your take. Like, do you feel that there is a right or wrong way to write or report about cricket?
No, what I would say, so I run my own sports writing course online. Fans with laptops, for anyone who's actually listened to this whole episode. I run that course, and so I get known as having a specific style. So one of them was that I split my narratives up. So instead of telling things chronologically, too much watching Tarantino films, I move things around and all that sort of stuff. And I got known for that. And then I got known for writing in short sentences, right? Before writing blogs and swearing. Before that, I got known for writing about global cricket and not writing about global cricket. Before that, then after that, I got known for writing long form features. Mm-hmm. After that, I got known for writing data features, right? There is no one way that any of these pieces should go. The reason that I'm known for all those styles is most cricket writers only write in one style over and over again. Most sports writers only write in one style. Most writers only write in one style. And I, as we talked about right at the start of this, I don't believe that one style fits every story. I'm working on a little thing at the moment, a bit of a silly thing for my emailer. It wouldn't work as a chronology. It wouldn't work as a through piece. It needs to stop and breathe, and you need to have a moment with it in a way that you perhaps wouldn't need to in other ways. So realistically, I think you need to understand that. Writing styles do not dictate what you do. The most important thing that you're doing in any one moment is the story that you are doing. If you just want to write what you're talking about, those societal bigger picture pieces, you can. You are going to find that eventually you're going to be telling the same story over and over again at a certain point. You might want to go to something else. That's more than fine. But if that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do. But there isn't one style to do that in anyway. There are many different ways to tell those kinds of stories. There's no wrong way to write about cricket. But you have to understand that you're trying to write about the cricket. Even if you're writing about the societal aspect of the game, you have to keep an essence of cricket and what cricket is within that writing. Yeah. And I think that can sometimes get lost. Look, there's no one sort of cricket writing that is always done well, and there's no one sort of cricket writing that is always done poorly. There are just many different ways to do this, and many different styles and many different topics. And in my writing course, what I say is I'm known for writing 3 or 4 different styles of pieces and types of pieces. But if you talk to one person, they will say, oh, he's the long form guy. And then you talk to someone else and he'll say, he's the data guy. That's actually, for me, that's the best thing that you can be, is all different audiences and try and look those sorts of things through. But if you just want to be the data person, that's fine. But explore how you were telling that data in every different time. You should never you never try and be only one topic, and you should never try and only be one style. If something interests you, it interests you. And if you're a societal writer and it's a technical thing and you think you can nail it, why would you not write it? I don't understand that.
Yeah. Have you heard about The Athletic and the work they're doing in football in the UK and even American sports in America?
Oh, I'm an Athletic subscriber.
Yeah, same. So the question I want to point towards you is that do you feel that something like that can happen in cricket, where there is, let's say, an independent source where all cricket fans, cricket consumers go towards to get all sorts of... So, I mean, obviously, The Athletic has a sort of audience base that they appeal to long-form content in that sense. But do you feel there is a space for that in cricket, or do you feel that it's still going to be independent journal houses that are going to put news out, or it's going to be Twitter people going to put news out?
Well, I mean, Cricinfo and CricBuzz already exist.
Yeah, but do you feel...
How different are they to The Athletic, realistically? The Athletic has a different kind of model, which could not beat both of them, but it could certainly be successful within cricket. But realistically, I mean, Cricinfo has long form writing. CricBuzz occasionally does long form writing. They're both coming at the sport. What The Athletic does, realistically, is it makes experts in individual topics. It's not the long form or the short form writing that's interesting from The Athletic. It's that if you look at English football, you have 30 clubs and 30 fan bases, but you didn't have 30 writers who covered those 30 clubs, which meant that the guy who covered, I'm trying to think low enough down, but the guy that covered
Lincoln City,
Fulham might have also covered Millwall. Right? Now, that's not to say he's not a really good journalist or she's not an incredible writer. Those things are possible. But if you're covering Millwall and you're covering Fulham, you're not going to pick up everything at both teams.
Yeah.
Right? One of my friends was a cricket writer and the writer on the Spurs. Right? Now, if you're covering Spurs and cricket, you're not going to cover either of those brilliantly. What The Athletic came along and did was say, why don't we just get a Denver Broncos writer, a Denver Nuggets writer, Colorado Avalanches writer, a Colorado Rockies writer, those sorts of things, right? I think that's the baseball team in Denver. That is the sort of specialization that is really, really interesting to me. And that's what I think The Athletic did that was great. Doesn't mean, but The Athletic, like I follow their basketball stuff. They also have guys like John Hollinger, guys like Ethan Strauss. They have bigger picture people on top of the individual people. But that kind of thing. Well, I mean, realistically, is there any reason why having an individual cricket writer who follow, like, there's no, if you follow T20 cricket, who's the cricket writer to follow, the professional cricket writer to follow, right? There is none.
Yeah.
you got guys like Freddie Wild, who generally works for teams, so he's not really always a writer, and he's not writing that often. No one's following that. Cricinfo don't have a T20 specialist writer. CricBuzz don't have a T20 specialist writer, as far as I'm aware. No newspapers do. Why would the athletic model not work in that particular case?
Yeah. I kind of wanted to get your take on the Al Jazeera files. Have you gone through them? The videos that were put up by Al Jazeera on cricket
with the documentary.
Yeah,
I mean, ages ago when it came out.
Yeah, but I still haven't had, let's say, a cricket journalist give me their views on it. Like, what do you make of it? Like, because some people say that yes, but it's only a person who's talking about Manda hoga. Like, there'll be a Manda in for 45 minutes. Like, was there something concrete you took away from that or something like that?
Well, no, if there was concrete, we would have had mass suspensions. Look, it's fixing match fixing where the way that cricket is currently run is almost impossible. Firstly, it's an international problem.
Yeah.
Secondly, realistically, until all cricket nations have legalized betting on sports, there's always going to be illegal betting on sports, which means that sort of stuff is going to happen. The thing about legal betting on sports is that it allows you to see fluctuations in markets, which means that you know if there's something dodgy is going on. The problem with illegal sports markets is you can't tell. And it's non-regulated, and the bookies are the cheats themselves, and goes on from there. So it doesn't matter if it's, a book will come out about match fixing, a documentary will come out about match fixing, an article will come out about match fixing. Essentially, the root cause problems of this cannot be fixed with the way that cricket is currently run. And also there are societal issues of the way that gambling is run. I would say that the longer I work in cricket, the more I realize that the players are the victims as much as the fans are, even the guys who are caught, and that it does not work the way that you think it does from the outside. But how we fix it is, the $10 billion question.
Yeah. What do you make of the IPL this season? Who do you think are favorites? Who do you think are going to go all the way?
To be honest, I haven't watched it that closely to give you a good tip on that. If I'm not working on a league, I watch it just as a fan from afar, and I wouldn't know. Delhi look interesting, but I don't know.
Just before you go, and this has been a really great chat, and thank you so much for the time you've given me. But if I could get some book recommendations from your side, that'd be great.
Oh, Test Cricket, the Unauthorized Biography. You should definitely get that.
Yeah.
That's a very good book. I mean, Usman Samiuddin's The Unquiet Ones on Pakistan cricket is obviously great. Cricket 2.0 is really interesting if you're interested in how cricket is developing. Trying to think of some others out there. Oh God, what's the name of it? The Unforgiven, the new book on the West Indian players who went and played rebel cricket in South Africa. Jeff Lemon's book as well. He's got another book coming out as well shortly. Yeah, there's never a shortage of good cricket books, really. I think, but yeah, there's quite a few out there.
Yeah, Jarrod, thanks a lot for this chat. Is there something you'd like to plug just before you go? I
feel like I've plugged everything, man. I would hate to think that there's something I've missed plugging in this episode so far. No, emailer on Substack, which is wickets@substack.com, wickets.substack.com, whatever it is. I've got the YouTube page, which you will probably be linking to in your YouTube video. I've got the podcast, but if you put my name in with something on the end of it, I'm probably doing it for someone or somewhere. So certainly, if you're interested in cricket, come across. And if you want to be a sports writer, I am a self-made sports writer, and I was terribly worried that I wouldn't know how to do it anymore one day. And so I basically rebuilt up my sports writing from scratch and took it apart like an engine and made a sports writing course. And I've tried to make it as cheap as possible because a lot of those courses just rip people off with information they don't need to know.
Yeah.
So I tried to make it very practical and very cheap. I think it's $50 US. It's an online course. So that's called Fans with Laptops. You can find that. But thanks for having me on, man. I better go and do my paid work.
Yeah.
All right. You have a good one, man.
Good one, man. Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this conversation with Jarrod Kimber. I thoroughly enjoyed it, really. I think Jarrod's one of the finest people who are spoken to in terms of cricket journalism, reporting about cricket, talking about cricket. So it was a great chat I felt I had with him, and I feel that if you have made it all this way through, I'm guessing you would have enjoyed it as much as I did, really. But yeah, if you'd like to support the podcast, if you'd like to support the work I'm trying to do consider following my Twitter, which is Agarwal Ishan _ or you can follow me on Instagram as well, which is Ishan Agarwal _ or yeah, just simply subscribe me to the YouTube channel and sharing it with your friends and family. Yep, thank you, and yeah, see you in the next one.